Then one day, as she was out in the village as usual, Princess Adamna met a very cool young man who was an ice cream seller. She bought some ice creams from him and they talked briefly. Princess Adamna, who seemed to like the young man, asked to know him better. "My friend, what is your name?" Princess Adamna asked. "My name is Onyemichi," he responded. "Are you from this kingdom?" Princess Adamna asked. "No, I am from the neighboring kingdom which is not far from here," he answered. And Onyemichi in return asked Princess Adamna what her name was and where she hails from. She told Onyemichi that her name was Adamna, an orphan from Umuotaka Kingdom who works as a maid in the palace. Onyemichi, who was amazed by Princess Adamna's beauty, asked her if they could become friends, and she accepted to be his friend. In a faraway kingdom of Umuotaka, there lived a beautiful princess named Adamna. She was so pretty, lovely, and an easygoing girl who was loved and adored by many in the kingdom. Princess Adamna was the only daughter of King Ukadaki and Queen Obianuju. She had two brothers who were based abroad studying, but when it was Princess Adamna's turn to join them, she blatantly refused to travel abroad to study because of her extreme love for village life. She lived in a grand palace with so many maids and domestic workers that were always at her service, and she was not allowed to do anything by herself. Princess Adamna could not go out of the palace on her own without the palace guards or maids. But in all this, Princess Adamna was so unhappy as she never liked being caged or watched all the time. She was a free-spirited person who wants to explore life, mix with people and make new friends without minding their social class or their family background. In fact, Princess Adamna by her own standard disliked the palace style of living and never enjoyed being a princess or being worshipped by people. She was royalty by birth, but she did not want to end up useless as a girl who could not even boil water for herself. Due to Princess Adamna's hunger for simple village lifestyle and freedom to be her real self, she would always visit her grandmother's home deep in the village, where she could freely do house chores, like cooking with her grandmother without being questioned or restricted to do so because she was a princess. Most times while at her grandmother's place, Princess Adamna would always stand by the window watching how other villagers, young and old, walked on the street freely. Sometimes she would watch young people of her age freely playing outside catching fun, and they all seemed very happy, but she was not allowed to join them just because of her royal status. At the palace, whenever the King Ukadaki and Queen Obianuju were not at home, Princess Adamna would go to the kitchen and cook for herself. And she did other house chores she was prohibited to do, to the surprise of the palace domestic workers, whose job was to serve the princess and never allow her touch anything. One day a palace maid tried to stop her from sweeping, but Princess Adamna told her that as a woman she should be allowed to do house chores. "My princess, please stop, you know you cannot do that. We are employed to serve you," the maid said. "Yes, you are employed to serve the king and the queen. But for me as a woman, I should know how to do house chores, with or without a maid around," the princess responded. Few days later, another palace maid saw Princess Adamna washing her clothes. She immediately went to stop her, for the fear of losing her job if the king finds out. But Princess Adamna insisted in washing her clothes and again told the maid that as a woman she must be allowed to do house chores. Then one day, after hearing that Princess Adamna had been doing house chores in the palace, King Ukadaki questioned the palace workers about it. One of them explained to the king that they had tried stopping her severally, but she always said to them that as a woman she must do them by herself. Later on, King Ukadaki and Queen Obianuju sat Princess Adamna down and made her to understand that her actions were degrading to the royal status of the kingdom. She was reminded that as a princess she should not live like a commoner. "My daughter, do you really know who you are? In case you don't, let me remind you. You are the only daughter of King Ukadaki, the Easy Udo, one of Umuotaka Kingdom. You are not a commoner but a royal princess of this kingdom, and as such you should maintain your royal status." King Ukadaki said, "But father, I am happy the way I am. I am a woman and should know how to do certain house chores. One day I will get married and be expected to do my duties as a wife." Princess Adamna said, "My daughter, you got it all wrong. You are born a princess, and as required you will get married to a royal family. As you can see, you do not need to do anything by yourself. You have a royal blood in you and that settles it," the queen stated. But in the contrary, Princess Adamna found it all very boring and funny and never enjoyed any of those overhyped palace living standard. One day, King Ukardaki noticed that Adamna was really unhappy. He later spoke to her and asked her why she looked so unhappy. "My daughter, the beautiful princess of Umuotaka Kingdom, why are you so sad? What is bothering you?" Princess Adamna replied, "Father, I want to live a free life like the common people in the village. They seemed so happy and fulfilled out there." A very worried King Ukardaki, on hearing Princess Adamna's response, said to her, "But my daughter, you are a princess with royal blood in your veins. You have a royal duty to the kingdom. You cannot think or live like a commoner, they are your subjects. How could you even think or say that with your mouth?" The king angrily responded and left. One day, a king named Adika from a neighboring kingdom, who was King Ukardaki's longtime friend, visited the palace. As they were discussing, he reminded King Ukardaki and Queen Obianuju that his son Prince Wozondu had returned from abroad and was ready to settle down and get married to Princess Adamna as agreed over the years. Princess Adamna, who accidentally overheard their discussions, later asked her father King Ukardaki what their discussion with King Adika, who visited, was all about. Then King Ukardaki told her that Prince Wozondu, the son of King Adika, who just visited, was about to come and officially ask for her hand in marriage. Princess Adamna was amazed to hear that, and she became unhappy with King Ukardaki, her father. But unknown to Princess Adamna, when she was born, King Ukardaki, her father, entered into marriage agreement with his friend, King Adika, who was Prince Wozondu's father. Meaning that Princess Adamna was reserved from birth to be Prince Wozondu's wife. Few days later, Prince Wozondu arrived at King Ukardaki's palace to meet with Princess Adamna for the first time. On his arrival, he was warmly welcomed by the king and Queen Obianuju. But to their disappointment, Princess Adamna stayed indoors busy with her phone and refused to see the prince. The prince interacted with King Ukardaki and Queen Obianuju before leaving the palace without understanding why Princess Adamna refused to see him that day. Later, King Ukardaki and Queen Obianuju confronted Princess Adamna as they were not happy for the embarrassment she caused them. They made her to understand that the two kingdoms had long time ago entered into agreement after she was born that she was to get married to Prince Wozondu. With that being said, Princess Adamna responded to her parents, "Father and mother, what were you both thinking? How could you bring in a man I know nothing about, to get married to? And to worsen the case, you arranged a royal marriage for me, and you both are aware how I feel about royalty and their overrated lifestyle. If I may ask, does it mean that I do not have a say on who to get married to? Am I not old enough to choose a man I want to live with?" But the queen said, "My daughter, you should understand that this royal arranged marriage had been in practice for ages. I assure you that you will learn to love Prince Wozondu with time. We know what is best for you. Your father and I never knew each other before we got married, and today you can see how much we love each other." The queen said, "But mother, I am old enough to choose my own man, and certainly it will not be a prince." Princess Adamna responded. After that discussion that day, King Ukardaki became so worried about Princess Adamna's statements and refusal to accept Prince Wozondu. Then few weeks later, Prince Wozondu visited the palace once again, and Princess Adamna agreed to meet with him just to please her parents. As they were sitting alone talking, Princess Adamna looked unhappy, but the prince was cheerful, and at the end he went back home happy as he believed that with time Princess Adamna would come around and accept him. Due to so much pressure on Princess Adamna to get married to Prince Wozondu, she started thinking on how to escape from the palace and have a feel of the village life without being monitored every day, which had been on her mind for so long. Then one day, Princess Adamna took a bold step and sneaked out of the palace without anybody noticing. She went into the village alone and freely walking like every other person in the village without a maid or guard. Princess Adamna, for the first time in her life, had a taste of freedom, and she was so happy. As she happily walked around the village, the villagers could not even recognize her as the princess because of the way she dressed and walking around without the entourage of maids and guards. In fact, she truly had fun that day, and later she quietly sneaked back to the palace. After that day, Princess Adamna continued sneaking out at any given opportunity to have the feel of the village life without anybody recognizing her as the princess. Then one day, as she was out in the village as usual, Princess Adamna met a very cool young man who was an ice cream seller. She bought some ice creams from him and they talked briefly. Princess Adamna, who seemed to like the young man, asked to know him better. "My friend, what is your name?" Princess Adamna asked. "My name is Onyemichi," he responded. "Are you from this kingdom?" Princess Adamna asked. "No, I am from the neighboring kingdom which is not far from here," he answered. And Onyemichi in return asked Princess Adamna what her name was and where she hails from. She told Onyemichi that her name was Adamna, an orphan from Umuotaka Kingdom who works as a maid in the palace. Onyemichi, who was amazed by Princess Adamna's beauty, asked her if they could become friends, and she accepted to be his friend. That day Princess Adamna returned to the palace with so much joy. And she started communicating with Onyemichi by phone almost every day. Her mood gradually changed and she suddenly became a very happy person. As a matter of fact, Princess Adamna's countenance glows whenever she was on phone with Onyemichi. Princess Adamna continued sneaking out of the palace anytime she had the opportunity to see Onyemichi at the spot where he sells ice cream, and she looked very happy around him. Months later they gradually fell in love and cared for each other a lot. One day the princess went all the way to the neighboring kingdom alone just to see Onyemichi, her poor ice cream seller, without anybody in the palace noticing, and she enjoyed the simple life of the commoners that she ever wanted. From that very day, King Ukadaki and Queen Obianuju noticed a mood change in Princess Adamna. They realized that she had suddenly become very happy and was always busy with a man on the phone. King Ukadaki and Queen Obianuju came to the conclusion that finally, Princess Adamna had accepted Prince Wozondu. But when Prince Wozondu visited again, Princess Adamna confidently told him to his face that she would never marry a royal suitor, and that did not sit well with Prince Wozondu, who later left the palace feeling rejected and unhappy. From that day Princess Adamna started avoiding the prince and even stopped picking his phone calls. But the king and the queen continued mounting pressure on the princess to marry Prince Wozondu. And when the pressure to marry Prince Wozondu became unbearable for her, one day she secretly packed few clothes and left the palace quietly. She went straight to Onyemichi's village to stay with him. As they were talking, surprised Onyemichi asked the princess why she had decided to leave the palace where she worked to be with him. Princess Adamna told him that she was sacked as a maid from the palace when the king found out that she was always sneaking out of the palace to see him. Onyemichi sympathized with her, but he reminded Princess Adamna that the life in his neighborhood was nothing to compare to the palace life of luxury she was used to. Princess Adamna smiled and said that she knew about that before coming to him, and moreover as an orphan that she grew up in similar environment. It was then that Onyemichi told Princess Adamna that he was an orphan too who never knew his father. He then narrated to her, "My mother's name was Oga Adinma, she raised me alone as a single parent. I learnt that she was a cook at a palace in one kingdom like that, somewhere before I was born. But she died without telling me who my father is for reasons best known to her, but I have made peace with it." Princess Adamna felt pity for him when she had his heart-touching story and how he grew up without a father. The next day in Onyemichi's village, Princess Adamna was amazed how friendly and welcoming the people around there were. They showed her love and treated her like one of their own. They openly danced with the princess as they welcomed her to their neighborhood. Princess Adamna later found out that Onyemichi was a man of the people, who was well known and loved in the community for his kind heart and respect he had for other people. Back at the palace, 2 days after Princess Adamna's disappearance, King Ukadaki and Queen Obianuju were worried sick for not knowing Princess Adamna's whereabout. The king, in his frantic effort to know where the princess was, spoke to some of the palace workers, and none of them seemed to know where the princess was or how she left the palace. Then the king and some of the palace workers began a search from one house to the other in their kingdom, but they could not find her. It was after their unsuccessful search in finding Princess Adamna within Umuotaka Kingdom that the king issued a royal statement, stating that whoever finds the princess and brings her back to the palace would be rewarded handsomely. In Onyemichi's house, Princess Adamna, who claimed to be a maid in the palace, did not disappoint in any way. She lived up to expectation as she cooked, washed, cleaned, and did all manner of house chores required of her as a young woman in Onyemichi's house. Thank goodness she forced herself to learn how to be a hard-working person. Onyemichi, a hard-working young man who also farmed, would go to the farm with Princess Adamna. When he noticed how eager Princess Adamna was to know much about farming, He gradually started teaching her how to plant, grow crops and take care of farm animals. Princess Adamna enjoyed every bit of the learning process as she loved trying new things and she had fun working and assisting Onyemichi at the farm. Princess Adamna loved her newfound life and she felt happy and free as she had always desired without missing a single moment of the palace life she left behind. One day, news got to the palace of Princess Adamna's whereabout from a villager who accidentally saw her in the neighboring kingdom. The palace messenger and a maid servant were immediately sent to the neighboring kingdom where they were directed. On reaching there, they surprisingly found Princess Adamna living happily in the midst of the common villagers. They asked her to come back with them to the palace but she refused and told them that she was fine living in the village. When their efforts to take her back home failed, they eventually returned back to the palace without her. On hearing that, the king sent 2 palace guards to use force and bring Princess Adamna back. They went as instructed and forcefully brought Princess Adamna back to the palace. At the palace, Princess Adamna, who was not wearing elegantly, was ordered to remove what she was wearing and put on her royal attire, which she later did. Unhappy King Ukadaki and Queen Obianuju spoke to Princess Adamna extensively. How could you leave the palace and live like a commoner, claiming to be happy? Are you out of your mind? Why have you chosen to rub mud on the reputation of the royal family? The king asked. Princess Adamna replied, Father, I am happy living the village life, where I can freely and easily interact with people no matter their class or background. It is certainly the kind of life I have ever wanted. It gives me joy and peace of mind. Please, my daughter, enough of this your madness with village life of the commoners. Stay in the palace where you belong and get married to Prince Wozondu. We are not asking too much from you, the queen advised. But Princess Adamna refused to take their advice as she was determined to return to Onyemichi, who was not at home when they took her from his place. Then King Ukadaki later threatened Princess Adamna and said, Listen carefully, young lady, if you dare leave this palace one more time, you will cease to be a princess and also lose all your royal privileges. Princess Adamna was not bothered by the king's threat. Few days later, when the king and queen returned home from an event, they noticed that Princess Adamna had left the palace once again and went back to Onyemichi's village, against the king's warning, even though she knew she might lose everything as a result of her action. When she returned to Onyemichi's house, he questioned the princess why the palace guards took her in such manner as was reported to him by his neighbors. Princess Adamna told him that the queen's most expensive gold necklace was missing in the palace and they thought she stole it while leaving the palace the day she was sacked. But they later found out that the queen misplaced it and they allowed her to go. Onyemichi, who never suspected any foul play, believed her. That day they talked about their dreams and hopes for the future. And Princess Adamna realized that Onyemichi was a graduate who studied business administration, but due to the level of unemployment, he ended up selling ice creams just to make ends meet, while still hoping to get employment one day. Few days after Princess Adamna's return from the palace, the disappointed King Ukadaki sent a message to Princess Adamna, telling her that if she refuses to marry Prince Wozondu and end up marrying a commoner, that she would cease to be his daughter and lose all her royal entitlements. That message meant nothing to Princess Adamna and she was not moved by the threat. In truth, her heart was set on marrying Onyemichi, her poor ice cream seller. One evening, Onyemichi, who never knew that Adamna was a royal princess, proposed to her and she gladly accepted to marry him. He said, Adamna, your presence around me has always brought joy and peace to my heart. Could you be my wife and accept me to be your husband? Princess Adamna, without hesitation, said, Onyemichi being with you has really brought out the best of me. You have truly given me the opportunity to live life as I have long desired. Yes, I will marry you. Few weeks later they got engaged and had an engagement party without the knowledge of the royal family. When the news of their engagement reached King Ukadaki, he was furious, and as he stood with Queen Obianuju, he sadly said, How could my only daughter, Princess Adamna, get engaged to marry a commoner? This cannot happen under my watch. It has never happened in the history of this kingdom that a nobody got married to a royal princess. Abomination. Queen Obianuju, who also wanted the best for the princess, could not understand why Princess Adamna chose the difficult life of a commoner to a very luxury royal life she was blessed with. Said, Who is after my daughter's happiness? My enemies must surely be responsible for this. After that, King Ukardaki announced that Princess Adamna had been stripped of all her royal privileges and royal title. From that moment, Princess Adamna was excommunicated and she ceased to be the princess of Umuotaka Kingdom. Princess Adamna did not care, as she had chosen love, happiness, and simple village life of equality and freedom over royalty. Few months later, Onyemichi and Princess Adamna got married, and they had a low-key marriage ceremony without the attendance of the royal family or any person from Umuotaka Kingdom. But people from Onyemichi's kingdom celebrated with joy and wished them well. Onyemichi and Princess Adamna started their life together as husband and wife, working very hard with the ice cream business and in the farm. Then one day Princess Adamna opened up to her husband Onyemichi and revealed her true identity to him. Unknown to Onyemichi, the princess who she married without knowing who she really was earned fat monthly upkeep allowances from her father the king, before she was cut off from her benefits. The princess told him that she had enough savings that would enable them start up a better business. Onyemichi was in total shock to know that Princess Adamna was not who she claimed to be. He could not believe that his humble and down-to-earth wife who enjoyed village life more than the villagers was a royal princess who ditched royalty just to be with him. He felt so humbled and could not express his feeling at that moment with words. As they discussed further, Princess Adamna suggested that with some of the money she saved that they could open a supermarket store, and they both agreed to do so. Few months later, they finally opened the supermarket and the condition of their living improved greatly. They were able to expand their farm from the income they got from the shop. 1 year after their marriage, they were blessed with a baby boy. They named him Obioma, which means happiness. On hearing the news of the birth of Obioma, King Ukardaki became restless and troubled in his heart. All of a sudden he started thinking about his daughter Princess Adamna a lot and wondered how she was coping with a newborn baby without any financial support from the palace. Day after day, King Ukardaki began to regret his action in cutting off Princess Adamna's monthly allowances, and he realized how harsh his decision was, but he continued praying and hoping that she and the baby were okay. As the news of Obioma's birth spread, one day Queen Obianuju, dressed in simple attires, secretly visited Princess Adamna. She was happy to see her daughter, her grandson Obioma, and Onyemichi all in good health. She finally realized that Princess Adamna was happy with the life she had chosen to live. The queen instantly learnt that love, peace, and happiness were more important than royal titles and privileges. And she felt bad for supporting King Ukardaki's decision in cutting ties with the princess. She finally gave Princess Adamna and Onyemichi her blessing, and she returned to the palace relieved. In a bid to make amends, King Ukardaki later invited Princess Adamna and Onyemichi to the palace for his blessing. As their visit to the palace would give him the opportunity to apologize to the princess and also get to know Onyemichi better. As they arrived at the palace, they were greeted by the happy villagers who were dancing and celebrating Princess Adamna's homecoming. It was a very lovely and highly emotional moment for Princess Adamna, who had already lost hope of returning to the palace ever again. King Ukardaki embraced them and instantly apologized to the princess for his harsh decision on her. The king told her that he was angry because he cared so much for her and did not want her to end up suffering. He warmly welcomed Onyemichi to the palace and promised to respect Princess Adamna's choice and her newfound life. Queen Obianuju also joined them and happily held her grandson Obioma. As the king, princess, and Onyemichi were inside discussing, the king asked Onyemichi who his parents were and if he had other siblings. To King Ukardaki's surprise, Onyemichi explained that he did not know his father, but that her late mother Oga Adinma raised him alone as an only child. He added that according to what he heard, that his mother used to work as a cook in a palace in one kingdom before she gave birth to him, and she never returned back to the palace after his birth. King Ukardaki puzzled and asked him more about his mother. As he explained in details, King Ukardaki shouted in shock to the amazement of Onyemichi and Princess Adamna. "Oga Adinma gave birth to you?" The king asked. "Yes, my king. Do you know who my mother was?" Onyemichi asked. "Yes, of course. Your mother was my cook and the best at that. The gods are wise. What a small world. May her gentle soul rest in peace," the king said. Then King Ukardaki told them that Oga Adi used to work in the palace long before Princess Adamna was born. He said, "Oga Adi had a boyfriend named Obioza who hails from this kingdom. He always sneaked around to see Ogre Edi. Your mother Ogre Edi later got pregnant, and when we questioned her she confirmed to us that Obioza was responsible. But before we could arrange a meeting with Obioza to ensure that he took responsibility, Ogre Edi, your mother disappeared without a trace. Obioza, who was not even aware of the pregnancy, was heartbroken that Ogre Edi, the woman he loved so much, left without a word. And he later found out that she left with a pregnancy, but nobody knew if she carried the pregnancy and gave birth or not. But many years later, Obioza became successful in business and he got married to his wife Ifedi. But unfortunately Ifedi only gave birth to female children, leaving Obioza with the pain of not having a male child. But Obioza refused to marry another wife as commonly done by our people. So as it stands you are likely to be Obioza's son. What a miracle. Okay, my king, how can I see this man? Onyemichi asked. Don't worry my son, Obioza based in the city, but I will inform him immediately to return to Umuotaka Kingdom as a matter of urgency. I will definitely get in touch with him and inform him about this good news. Upon his return to this kingdom, hopefully by tomorrow you will be taken to his house. The king responded. Later that day message was sent to Obioza to be in Umuotaka Kingdom as soon as possible. He was told that the king urgently wants him back home because there were special guests from the neighboring village who want to meet with him by tomorrow. The next day, as arranged, Onyemichi and Princess Adamna went to Obioza's house upon his return. When they arrived, Obioza saw Onyemichi and felt connected to him instantly but could not rightly figure out who he really was. But when Onyemichi introduced himself as Ogre Adinma's son, Obioza could not believe that he had a son all these years. Then he immediately embraced them with joy. It was an emotional reunion for both father and son. Obioza, who never felt the joy of having a male child, and Onyemichi, who never had a father in his life, could not be happier. Obioza and his wife Ifedi happily welcomed Princess Adamna and her baby Obioma to their family. At the end, Princess Adamna felt highly blessed to have her family back in her life. She was grateful to God for granting her the kind of life she had long desired. On the other hand, Onyemichi felt fulfilled for finally having Princess Adamna as a wife who truly loves him irrespective of his poor background. Onyemichi was highly grateful to God for finally having somebody to call a father after so many years without one. King Ukadaki later promised Princess Adamna and Onyemichi a proper royal wedding to celebrate their union. And the news of their planned royal wedding within a short period of time was heard all over the kingdom. Few months later the wedding took place in Umuotaka Kingdom and was attended by very happy villagers from Umuotaka and Onyemichi's kingdom. After their royal wedding, Onyemichi's father, Obioza, who was a proud father to the groom, gifted them a very beautiful mansion as their wedding gift. King Ukadaki as well blessed them with so many gifts, including cars in support of their marriage and also in memory of Ogre Edi, who served the royal family diligently. The king also reinstated Princess Adamna's monthly allowances. And they were grateful to King Ukadaki and Obioza for their generosity. Few years later, as Obioza grew older and weaker, he stepped down from active day-to-day running of his businesses and happily handed over his multiple business ventures to Onyemichi, who continued managing the businesses very well. Onyemichi later became highly successful and built several other businesses from the scratch, which additionally solidified Obioza's business empire as the biggest within their region. One day, Queen Obianuju said to King Ukadaki, "My king, do you know that true happiness and peace of mind come from the heart, not from titles or how much wealth one acquires?" The king nodded in agreement and responded, "Yes, you are right, my queen. Our princess taught us well. I used to think that the unflashy lifestyle of the commoners there was less fulfilling until our daughter Princess Adamna proved me wrong." At the end, King Ukadaki and Queen Obianuju finally found peace in their hearts, and they were very proud of their daughter and her choices. They learnt from Princess Adamna's life that true happiness does not come from material possessions but from a heart filled with joy and peace. Princess Adamna and Onyemichi were further blessed with more children, and their home was filled with love, happiness, and peace. Many people who heard the story of Princess Adamna learnt that the most important thing in life is for people to follow their heart and be true to themselves no matter what others feel and or how different it seems in the society. Their story became a big lesson, teaching everyone that life is all about choices, because the choice we make today determines what we shall become tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Please kindly subscribe, like and share. Remain blessed.